Hi, Black Hollywood Live fans. Today on Justice, we're talking a big Bill Cosby update and the return of private prisons. That and more on Justice is Served.
You are tuned into Black Hollywood Lives. Justice is served.
Oh man, what a good song for the return of private prisons. Well done, Yemi, for the song selection. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chelsea Galicia. You have tuned in to Justice is Served on Black Hollywood Live, where we cover the latest in legal news every single week. I am joined by my fabulous co-host at Yum Yums, whose name is Yemi Abayami. And that just occurred to me because we just asked what your Twitter was, and that was what stuck in my head. And I often confuse Shaka for his Twitter handle. The Twitter handle is Shaka Strong, but his name is Shaka Smith. Promise I'll be able to keep it straight. We are a panel of lawyers talking about the legal stories that we've found in the news that we thought would be relevant to you all. I have thought that this Bill Cosby thing, needed to go somewhere fast. Fast is not going to happen. But we did have a major update. And I think if it wasn't for all the political news, this probably would have gotten more attention. Yeah. That's why I thought we should start here. I mean, we have covered Bill Cosby on the show since the day I started 2 years ago. It's almost 2.5 years ago. And we're talking about the criminal case. There's only one criminal case against him. It's in the state of Pennsylvania. And the district attorney in that case wanted to present 14 other alleged victims. Yeah. And I loved this story because it took me back to week one of Crim Pro, right? Yeah. Where they say that in terms of presenting evidence in court, you can't present evidence of a person's prior bad acts.
Yeah, typically you can't, but we know if it's modus operandi,
yes,
then you can if it's a particular way of doing things.
Showing a pattern, showing that something wasn't a mistake.
And we know that he typically likes to use these quaaludes or these other drugs to knock them out, and the victims seem to have the same story throughout. So
DA wants 14.
Right, and so the judge said, no, we'll give you one witness, and I think that's kind of consistent with other jurisdictions where you don't want to have all 13 people saying the same thing because that might be somewhat prejudicial.
Somewhat is probably a safe word.
It might be too prejudicial to the defendant, but you can one person, two people, three might be sufficient to establish the pattern that Shaka referenced.
So there's one. I'm using air quotes because we don't know for sure, but I was going to call her a victim. Her name is Casey. She was an assistant to Cosby's former agent and worked at William Morris in the 90s. And I was interested, and I didn't see the answer to this, but why she, of all of the victims, was the one selected.
Well,
you guys have any ideas?
Yeah, it seems like she might have been the most recent.
I figured perhaps maybe it was her version of events was most closely similar to Andrea Constant, the victim in the criminal assault case, and so perhaps that was why she was selected.
I think it's a number of, because I think the details are typically the same. I mean, he hasn't really changed amongst all these different...
Well, right. I think the details are going to be pretty similar in each of the cases, but I think it's a mixture of things. One, I'm sure it probably does have to do with the similarities between the two events, and the fact, coupled with the fact that hers was so recent, it seems maybe she was just the most appropriate person to include.
So how big of a factor do you think that's going to play on a jury?
I think it's big because you could request a jury instruction that the jury cannot consider anything that they've heard outside the jury courtroom, or they can't consider evidence of any prior bad acts. But now they don't have that instruction. You're going to actually get to hear what the sort of modus operandi of Mr. Cosby. So I think it's going to have a very powerful impact on the jury.
And I think just by virtue of being a human being, the moment that you have one person claiming something and then you have a second person claiming something similar, regardless of whether it's an assault case or whether it's a pattern of stealing candy out of a candy jar, I think you're just more inclined to believe that the first instance that the second instance is true once there was a prior instance. So I think it'll have a pretty strong impact.
I mean, I think that for as many victims as there allegedly are, one seems so limiting. That's a big deal. That the judge allowed any. I foresaw that coming, at least one, but I don't know. 3 sounds about right. I mean, aren't there really like 50 of them out there?
I think there might be the reliability of time. I don't know how far the other people were. I don't know if they were the 80s or the 60s or the 70s. You know,
although I wonder how difficult it would be to find. I mean, there are so many women. I can't imagine that they would be so difficult to find someone somewhat recent. But I agree with you in terms of if the exception to allowing this type of evidence relies on the fact that like we're trying to establish a pattern of operation.
Yeah.
I don't know that one person
is enough to establish a pattern.
that pattern.
Yeah, and so that's not fair. And then on the other side, you're Bill Cosby, and you're like, all these 14 women are liars. Well, but that's up to a jury to decide if they're liars. So I think the judge erred in restricting it to 1. I don't know about all dozen plus, but
I think there's a moment you get like too prejudicial versus probative, and so just.
But how do you set a pattern with just one other person?
Because you say, look, it's happened before, and here's what took place. I think it sets enough pattern in the jury's mind to go, he likely did this. I think 2 or 3 really bring home the point, but it might be negligible at that.
It's a balancing act at the end of the day, because you do want this individual, if they are going to be convicted, you want them to be convicted based on today's crime, the crime at hand, not based on previous instances. And in this case, keep in mind, he's not been convicted of assault anywhere. It's not like this person is testifying that he was convicted in a prior case. It was just an accusation. Under Pennsylvania law, that they're allowed to bring in accusations.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that the defendant was convicted of the.
And I think Constant was in 2005.
A while ago, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the reliability of bringing someone from the 70s now to attest to the pattern in 05 or so much more recently, I think that's a little bit dubious. But again, I think the Cosby lawyers are playing delay. So if they'd let all 14 on, I don't think anybody would be testifying.
He was like arrested for this in like December of 2015, right?
Yeah, and so now it looks like they're trying to bring in an outside jury, because I know they wanted to change the venue, which I believe was denied, but now they're trying to bring in an outside jury.
Importing people to Pennsylvania.
Which we remember.
Who hasn't heard? I mean, you're not going to find.
Yeah.
How are you going to find any juror who's not already kind of had their minds tainted by the news coverage? I'm like, good luck to these guys, but.
Hopefully, if they don't delay too much further in July, which will probably be here in the blink of an eye, since it's already March, we were already commenting on that. We'll start to actually get into a real life trial in July. Yeah. Hopefully of this year, 2017. Okay, and this story, this is so bad. This just goes to my state of mind. I read this this headline. Officer arrested in murder of unarmed man, and my first thought was, oh good, at least he was charged, right? Like that's the standard.
It's now good that
And I'm like, wow, I have really I don't know what that says about me or my mindset, but that I went straight to, oh well, at least he was charged.
Well, I think that is the good part about it, is that that's what kind of gives us a sense of justice, that things are taking place. I think that's why we have these Black Lives Matter.
The standard of feeling like justice is served is dropped so far low that we're at least he was arrested for it. So this is the case of a man named Chad Robertson. He was 25 years old. He was on an Amtrak train on his way home from a wedding in Memphis with some friends when he was shot by an officer. It doesn't seem very obvious as to why. There was some sort of confrontation, but it didn't look like there was anything threatening, no weapons. It didn't seem like some chaotic scene. It seemed, from what I read, that the officer knelt down and announced, "This is a gun. I'm going to shoot."
Yeah, it escalated really, really quickly. He was on a stopover from the wedding in Memphis. He was going to, I think, Minneapolis, and they had a stopover in Chicago. And apparently, him and his friends had been smoking outside. Officers approached him and
marijuana.
Yes.
At this point, it's like, who the heck cares? I guess Jeff Sessions does, but that's another story.
Officers approached him, told them to put it out, told the three of them to put it out. They put it out, kind of scene ends. They carry on their business. Then the officers approached them a second time, asking to kind of search their belongings, and that's when I guess things kind of escalated very, very quickly. They refused. This individual, Chad Robertson, denied him to allow him to search his belongings.
Which you're allowed to do.
Yeah.
But he took off running, and when he took off running, the officer
shot at him.
Yeah,
it's like a Walter Scott situation.
Knelt down, unholstered. That's what Robertson's family's lawyers are saying, is that he was very calm about it. took his time, knelt down, aimed, didn't give any command or warning.
Which clearly sounds to me like he wasn't in danger, didn't feel endangered for his life or the life of somebody else if he was so calm and methodical about it.
The lawyer
Well,
is...
I don't want to...
The lawyer for the officer is saying that his partner had also patted down one of the friends and felt, I mean, it was kind of, I mean, we've all heard the story before, felt something that felt like a gun.
Yeah.
But if it felt like a gun, then you are able to take it out of the pocket and see if it is a gun. So that is BS.
And he felt that, you know, the officer had felt that this is the partner of the officer. The partner felt like he felt a gun. And meanwhile, this guy has run off. He says he thought he saw him turn around and reach for a gun. He was in fear of his life. The usual.
Yeah.
So the officer shoots Chad Robertson in the back, and he becomes a quadriplegic and dies days later. I mean, so tragic.
And I didn't even know the authority of transit police. I didn't realize that they had guns or were armed, and you know.
Yeah, Oscar Grant. That's the story where I learned that. Right. So this is, you know, kind of at least he's been charged. There was no gun found on Chad Robertson, and they did find an insignificant amount of marijuana on him. I cannot believe somebody died over this.
And he had no criminal history. He had 2 children. He had a family. So it is very unfortunate. Apparently there are recordings at the station of what happened, but Amtrak has declined to release them.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't see that. So, yeah, that's, Well, let's add in with the story that I just recently found. This one is, like, gonna make you cringe if it doesn't make you cry first. This is the case of, what is this guy, John Howard? A judge decided that he didn't need any jail time for assaulting a mentally handicapped black teammate on his football team. This was a high school player. Like, what he did is almost so heinous, I'm like, I can't even say it, but it involves a hanger, his rectum, and kicking the hanger into it. And this kid, 19 years old, basically has gotten away with probation and
for a felony charge.
It's a Brock Turner situation. Oh well, I guess Brock at least got some jail time.
I mean, I don't even know. I mean, there were other worse parts about this. First of all, the judge said this was not race related at all.
When they were calling him racial slurs, fried chicken and grape soda, but that they
and
didn't
the
believe
judge
were
said,
racial slurs.
Judge says nobody thinks that those are racial slurs.
Yeah,
I don't.
That was dumbfounded when I read that.
And then
I mean, that's willful blindness, is what it is.
Yeah.
He knows exactly what they're alluding to when you call a black person fried chicken or watermelon or grape soda.
Yeah.
And then
you know what that implies.
The other thing that had gotten knocked down was that the sexual assault charge had been removed, that the judge felt that this was not a sex crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I didn't understand, and maybe I need to read more into state law regarding that, because it wasn't considered sexual assault.
Which
and I'm
I
like,
thought,
what is?
But I think the judge's theory was that when he kicked the hanger, it wasn't with the intent of going in the rectum. That he may have kicked in that area, not even realizing a hanger was there.
That's what the defense was.
Yeah.
If that is your defense, oh dear God, you are really. I can't
Reaching.
even. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
but not reaching because it looks like the judge bought it.
I don't think he bought it. I just think he was looking for any reason to not convict. I mean, it sounds like this town is really small. The town had like 300 some odd people.
We do have to mention the May 16th recording, Blues May 16th.
Yeah, that was weird.
So there was a recording where it looks like the teammates and the coaches recorded this teammate and
the victim.
Who is mentally
handicapped. Yeah. And they got him to basically say that nothing really happened, and he wanted them to all be friends, and
that he lied, he made it up,
that his parents had been pressuring him.
Yeah, for this $10 million.
Yes.
And so he says that, but now it looks like their retort is that his teammates and the coach took advantage of this guy because of his mental handicap, because of his mental disability.
And we're telling him, hey, we're
we
all
love
friends.
You, we friends. Yeah.
This is just so sad
so
story.
It's really difficult to know how much the judge considered that tape as well. I think that may have had something to do with.
But if that
He
that
entered-
doesn't.
Well, the guy he
That's
entered.
BS to
He
me.
entered. Well, he entered a guilty plea anyhow.
Yeah. For
Guilty
this
of injury of a child was
felony,
what
felony injury of a child.
Rather than sexual assault.
So if that was his defense, that he didn't, he didn't mean to whatever, that just.
But
it doesn't belong anywhere.
But technically, it wasn't an Alford plea.
It's an Alford plea.
So you're kind of pleading guilty, but not guilty.
It's like no contest.
Exactly.
But nobody disputes that the incident occurred.
Right.
Nobody
no one
disputes
that it
that-
occurred. No one
that
disputes
a
that he
foot
kicked.
made
that he
contact with
kicked
a hanger
kicked
that
him.
went further into his rectum, but whether or not he was kicking for a hanger or kicking in general.
I mean, how would you just randomly be kicking in the area and like, oops, I didn't know I
And
had.
I think it's ridiculous, but-
I didn't see the hanger in there. And
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous defense, but that's what the judge bought.
I mean, okay. I mean,
I don't even.
it just seems so intentional because they brought the guy over, said, "Let me give you a hug." The way I read that was maybe that they were hugging him and holding him in place. Someone
Yes.
inserted, because obviously a hanger is not going to just kind of find its way in there. It seemed very, very intentional, and that this might have been kind of like
So we had
a
the
group.
first person insert the hanger, and then and this guy went and kicked it.
Yeah, knowing full well what was where and
Unreal. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this except the fact that justice was definitely not served.
But the good part, this was a state case, and looks like they're pursuing this on a federal level as well.
and the parents have a civil suit, I believe, as well.
civil case,
So we'll see what happens.
And
The
so then
standard is, of
when
course,
people say,
lower.
oh, all these people, suing for money, everything's just about money. It's like, well, when you can't get a reasonable sense of justice from the criminal courts,
The
that's
only thing
where
people
you
pay
got to
attention
go.
to, yeah.
And now he's living in an assisted living home. Apparently, he's tried to commit suicide multiple times.
The victim. Oh, God. Okay, so here's more terrible news while we're on a roll. We were all excited a couple months ago when President Obama and the Department of Justice announced that they were going to roll back their involvement with private prisons, that they were not going to renew the contracts they had with these private prisons, and it's a celebration around here.
Yeah,
and
it was great. It was largely a symbolic move, but it was going to kind of show the states like this is where things are moving.
Right, and it made sense because the number of prisoners that we needed to house was going way down anyway, and hopefully we thought, okay, maybe now we're going to turn a new page and we're going to stop, this mass incarceration movement, and things are on the up and up. I thought for sure that things like, or shows like Orange is the New Black and 13th and those kinds of things that show problems of mass incarceration and private prisons and the whole thing was somehow weighing on the public consciousness, and that had shown up in our politics. And then now Jeff Sessions is like, no, we need those because apparently we're in for a crackdown and we need more bed space. Yeah. Did that make sense to you?
It actually did make sense to me.
You said did or didn't?
It did. It made complete sense to me because I do think Jeff Sessions is going to try to go for some sort of crackdown and put as many people in prison as he possibly can.
I mean, they were insinuating that they're going to crack down on marijuana.
Yeah. And so I do
What a
think,
waste.
And I think it's going to be very purposeful to put that money back into these private prison groups because we know that these groups have donated tons of money to Donald Trump's campaign.
There's two main ones, and we talked about one of them, and I thought it was interesting that they had changed their names.
Of course,
Yeah,
CCA,
after that
Correction
expose.
Corporation of America
CCA.
became Core Civic.
Yeah, they've
what a
gotten
nice
so much
euphemism.
flack, So CCA was like really synonymous with just badness, and so they just tried to change their name.
And the
remove all
Geo
correct-
Group.
like the corrections reference and the prison references, core civic. They're a very civic-minded.
So these two groups
organization now.
that donated money, obviously their stocks went through the roof, upon Sessions' announcement. You
Yeah.
know, and
After dropping
Yeah.
from
Well, under
Obama's
Obama,
announcement, yeah.
So it makes sense what they're doing. It's just, we need to hold them to account because the Board of Prisons still makes the decisions regarding who to place where.
Yeah.
So as people that, vote, we need to talk to the Board of Prisons and write into the Board of Prisons and make sure they're not making decisions that are deleterious for our prisoners.
Yeah, because otherwise the only people sort of lobbying for the cause are these private prisons who stand to make a whole lot of money on this. Even when we know, the interim Attorney General Sally Yates had issued a report that said that privately run prisons were more dangerous, they have more safety and
poor
security.
conditions,
Yeah, so we talked about an article where a reporter went undercover as a corrections officer, told us what the conditions were like. And so all the signs were like, we're moving in the right direction. And for this to happen was such a freaking bummer.
And we have prisoners that have died in these private prisons. We have correctional officers that have died during riots in the private prison. So there's certainly no great case for why they're better. It seems, in fact, they're far worse.
Yeah, but I guess they're going to be here to stay unless enough of us know about it and care about it. And I don't know how much our voices can overcome all the, I'm sure it's millions
financial
of dollars.
incentives,
Yeah.
And then it's also challenging given that the people most impacted by these types of changes are people behind bars who
That
have
can't vote
limited
in our
community.
country.
And like we talked about it, was that
access
last
to
week, how we talked
communication.
about Van Jones in his article in Vanity Fair was saying that the reason that voter suppression is now the form of convict a young black man of a felony and remove his ability to vote.
For life.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Shall we do one more crappy one?
Yeah, why not?
At least this one. At least this one isn't a law yet. But I guess I can't be too surprised about what's going on in Oklahoma. I've never been there. I don't mean to speak badly about them, but and some people are like, yeah, this just feels like I'm talking about a different country. But what's going on in Oklahoma is that the Republican representative Justin Humphrey sponsored a bill requiring women to get the written, informed consent of the father of the fetus before the woman is allowed to terminate her pregnancy.
And also
And
give
to
the
notify.
identity and give the identity of the father as well.
Yes. Okay. So trying to leave politics out of this, attempting, valiant efforts here. Let's talk about how constitutional this is.
Well, it's not very constitutional. But
Not very.
But what I will say is I get it in the sense of if we have this law, maybe people will think before they make poor decisions. So, if I know that I'm going to have to get the written consent of the father and also disclose the name of the father to my doctor, that might make me think twice.
You know what it makes me think? I'm like, okay, now I think we need written, signed consent. A man is responsible for getting that before he sleeps with a woman.
I think that's even better. So I get why
He signs like, I will provide this much child support for 18 years if I accidentally knock you up. I mean, like this should be a two-way street. But what I'm proposing is straight up ridiculous, but it only sounds sensible in light of this bill.
Well, I like where the policy prescription was coming from in that sense, but again, it's not constitutional because when you think about what it does in the post sense, once you are pregnant, now it takes away the woman's right to her body, and so.
Well, he's saying that the woman, this is not a right to her body. This is a quote because I can't even. Comprehend this enough to be able to put it into my own words, and the real words are just so great. Here's what he says: I believe this is the representative who wrote this bill. I believe one of the breakdowns in our society is that we have excluded the man out of all these types of decisions. Shaka, you got an opinion on that?
Yeah, I get where it's coming from.
Oh, that's really nice of you.
However, I don't agree with it,
Okay,
but I
good.
understand.
He said, I understand that they feel that it is their body. I feel like it is a separate, what I call them is you're a host. And meaning that
Why are you nodding?
that women, it's not really their body; they're just a host.
I didn't realize. I forgot you were going to say the host part. I thought I was going to stop. I said, well,
How could you forget that? How could
And
you
listen to
forget
this.
that
And you
part?
know when you
That's
enter
all I
into a
remember.
relationship, you're going to be that host. And so if you pre-know that, then take all precautions and don't get pregnant.
so,
Okay, I can agree with this.
Like there's a
Is the
sense of-
state of Oklahoma handing out birth control for free to men and to women? If they're not,
I mean, I understand the sensibility of what he says, but you know how we talk about white privilege? I think this is what we call like male privilege. So, we as males may not necessarily understand or fully inhabit this idea of having a body that you can control, and I think that's where this guy's coming from. He's really speaking from a point of male privilege, not understanding the autonomy that a woman should have over her body.
yeah. So he says So that's where I'm at. I'm like, hey, your body is your body and be responsible with it. But after you're irresponsible, then don't claim, well, I can just go and do this with another body when you're the host and you invited that in.
So, once
Okay,
you,
this is really frightening. There are a lot of people, I'm assuming, who voted for this guy. I mean, either he hid this kind of thinking when he was running or he was open with it, and people agree with it.
Well, I think there's a
I
logic.
think in Oklahoma, probably.
Well, there's a logic behind what he's saying that does not actually address the real world circumstance of what takes place.
And is really incompatible with the Constitution.
Yeah,
I understand
absolutely.
people don't like abortion. I don't know people who are fans of abortion. Even Margaret Sanger, who helped sort of start Planned Parenthood, wasn't like a fan of abortion, but it's.
But she wasn't a fan of violating constitutional rights to support that.
So
you can have other means, whether it's education about sexual
access
education,
to birth control,
right?
And
so nobody likes it, but we've got to deal with the Constitution still anyway, even if you don't like it.
Exactly. So even when we talk about the logic of it, we have to say, look, the 14th Amendment says you cannot take life, liberty from anybody without due process. And so what this does is infringes upon a woman's liberty over her own body without due process. And so when you have these restrictions, whether it be restrictions on where you can get an abortion or how it can be performed, that's where they have to do a balancing test. And here, this to me falls way too far.
So
And what's interesting is that at the end result is that it puts the power in the hands of the husband and the state over this woman who now
The
has
husband,
no,
you're so kind to assume that it's a husband.
the father and the state, and now the woman has literally no control whatsoever. I mean, literally, they are the ones holding the keys.
Okay, so let's assume that we have a listener from Oklahoma or from somewhere else who believes this, and they say, Shaka, I hear you saying about this 14th Amendment due process. What about the baby's due process to have its right to life without due process? I mean, it has no due process when it's aborted. What's the constitutional response to that?
Well, then you would talk about where does life begin, and so around the 20th week that we have these certain rules that say here's where you can have an abortion and when you can't, and that's another debate in of itself. We tried to have the heartbeat rule that's been argued to have when the baby first has a heartbeat. That's when that begins.
It's really early, and so that didn't fly.
Yeah, so that's going to always be subject to debate, and I think that is kind of where you're going to see this administration move towards. You're not going to try to overturn Roe v. Wade, but I think you're going to see them try to put a lot of restrictions on abortion that essentially make it illegal.
And okay, I just hope they get really generous with birth control at the same time.
Yeah. But I mean, it looks like we're getting the right result in this particular case in Oklahoma. They're not moving forward with this bill, and so the public really has to be vigilant here.
No, but I was going to say yes. Fortunately, there was a large I might be mixing this up. With
Yeah,
that.
it's in the Arizona one that was the one that got protested. This Oklahoma one, who knows what's going to happen to it? This other case.
Oh, so Oklahoma is moving forward.
That's as far as I can tell. I didn't see that they were going back on that. The other case, and why it's a little confusing, is because we have another bill that looked really interesting that was proposed in the state of Arizona, that if you are an organizer of a protest,
that's not moving forward.
and there are any violence or damage caused by that protest, the organizer will be held liable even if the damage was caused by the work of an opposing group. Holy moly! It's like to try and explain how far this causal connection is allowed to be this does not exist in the law. I mean, it reminds me back again to law school, that Paulsgraf case. Remember an explosion on the train tracks, and something happens way down the line, and how can you sue somebody for something that was so tenuously connected, that the person who set off, who slipped and caused the fireworks to go off, and then the package to fall all these cars down. How responsible can you hold somebody who couldn't foresee that something would happen?
Well, we do have the doctrine of respondeat superior, where your employer is responsible for bad acts of the employee if they're kind of within the scope of employment. So for me, this if they had said you were inciting violence, you called for a protest that specifically incited violence, and then you're then responsible for the outcomes of any damage of that violence, regardless of what side it comes from, that would make a little bit more sense. But it's just protest in general.
Yeah.
So you're really chilling free speech, and you're making people liable.
That was the problem. It was such a clear free speech violation, and like, how can you hold somebody responsible for something that they're not directly responsible for?
I don't understand why they don't consult maybe an attorney. Well, why wouldn't you add in...
Well, most politicians are assumed to be attorneys, but somehow every Republican in Arizona Congress politics was for this bill. And it was only after there was public outcry about the chill on free speech that they decided, oh yeah, maybe not.
I think if they would have added some provision that outlined if you were inciting a violent protest and what that element of violence means, I think the bill would have been fine. So it's just curious to me they didn't kind of go that route.
It seems just like super broad.
It's just like they can place like a lien on your
home,
car, whatever asset.
Just for planning a protest, just for speaking out. Yeah.
That is insane.
But that one's not moving forward.
That one's not, unfortunately.
I can't believe we were right next door to that state. I mean, whoa. I think what was it, the House Speaker that said that, we're not even going to take this up. This is ridiculous. Yeah. Number one, and number two, there's so much outcry. We're not even going to it's not. I think he even mentioned it's not even about I wonder if the people who spoke out got there
of it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess it goes to show that when there is enough public outcry, even the craziest among our politicians will have to listen. Okay, and finally, man, this was not a great day in the law for me, but Shaka, I think, likes this one. This one's Shaka's "I told you so" moment of the day.
Free speech, right? Yeah.
He loves free speech, and because of that, he is happy that a judge has ruled against the law that would force, essentially, IMDb to remove people's ages when they ask for it to be removed. We have followed this from the beginning when it was first passed here in California, and we speculated about what would happen to this. And so far, Shaka's on the right side of the law.
Well, yeah. So really, this law was intended to prevent age discrimination in the industry, in the entertainment industry, and there are many protections in different industries against age discrimination. But the question is whether or not this would actually help. How many people being discriminated based on age because someone went and saw the IMDb page and saw an age there? I think it's probably very few, if really quantifiable at all. So I think.
But the union felt so strongly that it made it feel like it does have a big impact.
And that was the union's position, but
it continues to be so. Like
I feel like they saw IMDb as a hindrance to their goals of kind of more inclusion and less age discrimination. Yeah. But I think you're right that maybe it's not just IMDb. I mean, there have to be other less restrictive ways that don't necessarily impinge on free speech to get at your greater goal of reducing discrimination, and that this just wasn't the way to do it.
Yeah, just because there's some connection at all doesn't mean that's the way you should go. It's gotta be least restrictive means to get there.
Well, it is interesting that you said that. So the federal judge for now has just granted an injunction. So basically, it's like frozen.
Which was good because IMDb refused to comply. So.
Right. And in the decision, the judge wrote some pretty strong language. It's difficult to imagine how the bill or how the law could not violate the First Amendment. He says the statute prevents IMDb from publishing factual information. Mm-hmm. But we've talked on the show before about how I think not all factual information is information that is for the public's consumption. And the most common example I can think of is like your health history. Yeah. Even though there are facts that you've been diagnosed with certain things, that shouldn't be allowed to just be on the internet.
Their argument was that you're imposing liability on me for putting up this factual information, and yet this law pretty much only applies to me. It does, a lot of this information in terms of ages, it can be found on Google, it can be found on Wikipedia. Yeah. You're not sanctioning these other companies. You're only sanctioning IMDb. These, what do they call it? A commercial online entertainment employment services company. That's who it applies to. It doesn't apply to these other platforms where you can get the same information. So to impose liability in one instance and not the other, I think IMDb actually has a fair argument in that respect.
And where they do keep the age and that kind of information, it's not really a commercial it's
the free service.
It's a free service.
But the free service is kind of a marketing step to the paid service. It's a funnel.
You could view it that way, but I personally don't. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So I wanted to get to this part. The judge said, quote, "To be sure, the government has identified a compelling goal, which is preventing age discrimination in Hollywood, but the government has not shown how AB 1687 is necessary to advance that goal." He says, in fact, it's not clear how preventing one mere website from publishing age information could meaningfully combat discrimination at all. And even if restricting publication on this one website could confer some marginal anti-discrimination benefit, there are likely more direct, more effective, and less speech-restrictive ways of achieving the same end.
Exactly.
Which is basically what you've been saying for months now. Okay, I hear that. And the word that he used in here that struck me a little like, I don't think that's the standard, or maybe it is showing that it's actually necessary. Necessary is not, is that the standard for any kind? Like you have to show something is
Yeah, it's got to be necessary.
Well, it takes me back to law school. Yeah. Remember in constitutional law, when there's any kind of discrimination, the very first step is to figure out which class that kind of discrimination or what kind of protection it gets. Yeah. So racial discrimination gets the highest protection, strict scrutiny. Stuff like gender discrimination, that gets intermediate. And discrimination based on something not truly meaningful.
Some compelling interest,
I don't know. Something that's like not immutable, something that you can, I can't think of one right now, but I don't know, maybe a certain zip code. Yeah. If you live in a certain, that would get the lowest level of scrutiny. And based on the level of scrutiny, the standard by which the discrimination must be moving that compelling state interest forward.
So I believe age discrimination falls under intermediate, and it's got to be necessary.
Well, I would like necessary language is for like racial discrimination, the highest form of it. The first level is like there's a compelling state interest and the law.
Rationally related,
Rationally related. Man, you're so good. You remember that.
It's like you were in law school just last year.
Okay, so rationally related is the lowest level, and then the intermediate. The intermediate is not necessary.
I thought it got a necessary.
I thought that the strictest level of scrutiny was like absolutely narrowly tailored
for compelling government state interest.
We need a common law professor on here.
I think you guys are both right, but I think when we're talking about potentially limiting, free speech, that's at the cornerstone, at the bedrock of the founding principles of this country. So in terms of making that type of limitation, they are going to be looking at something that's least restrictive.
So you don't think that this is being heard as a discrimination issue? It's being heard as a First Amendment issue.
I think it's I think so. I think that's IMDb's argument is certainly that it's a free speech issue because it's the state of California imposing liability on them for publishing, certain information and restricting their ability to do so.
I don't know. I think this actually necessary language is where this decision has some room for error, because to say that the law has to be actually necessary is a little too high.
Aren't they saying that it not even saying that it has to be necessary, but they're saying it's not even.
And I think it's precedent. It's not even. I think it's precedent.
It says that puts the burden on the government. This is what the judge said. That puts the burden on the government to show the restriction is actually necessary.
Yeah, that's a precedent. I'm fairly sure that's one of the
we got
here.
Pretty strict standards here in California.
For free speech, absolutely.
Okay, fine. So this was not really a great day.
Your age is going up on IMDb, Chelsea. Check out Chelsea Galicia, IMDb. The age will be
whatever. I'm just going to come out and say it. But I'm also not an actor, where
you're in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, but I'm on here as me, and so I don't care. Everybody knows that I'm 33. But for actresses, when there are so many roles for young women, then as you get older, you're looked over. But if they just maybe, maybe
if
you don't look your
I
that
think if
age.
you still look young, you probably are going to be in the running for that part. But at least that's my sense.
Maybe that's your man privilege speaking.
I mean, one of the other arguments that IMDb was making was the fact that the law is just too broad in and of itself, that it doesn't necessarily only apply to birth information about on-screen talent, the individuals that you actually expect to be victims of age discrimination, but that it applied to all entertainment.
Yeah, whether it was someone with a PA or a gaffer or
I'm hearing that even
sound guy,
even writers and stuff are having issues with age discrimination.
Does the PA have an issue? Does the sound guy have an issue? So it was just very broad law.
I mean, there is age discrimination in the other way. People don't want to hire people or work maybe with people who are over the age of 50, 55 or something,
but again,
and they're going to discriminate in the other way.
But again, there has to be some nexus. Are these people checking IMDb and going, okay, and this is why discrimination is happening? Is it happening
it's so hard to be able to pin that down.
I think in some cases it's very easy. In this case, it wasn't, so that's why the judge went this way.
Oh, man. Okay, so the last week of February did not contain much justice in my eyes.
Well, I was very happy with this particular decision.
I think the state needs to kind of reevaluate how it went. I think it's a good goal to have in terms of reducing age
very difficult.
discrimination. But I think they need to be a bit more. I hate to use the word narrowly tailored, but they need to be a bit more specific about how
this is a really hard kind of discrimination to combat.
I mean, I would love to see it quantified a little bit more. I'd love to see. Are there surveys?
Well, and directed towards the right entities, and making sure that the stipulations in the law apply to the appropriate people who are actually being impacted by age
and how many
discrimination.
complaints is SAG getting, or the union getting about age discrimination?
I would imagine that it would have to be a lot for them to take up this cause so strongly.
I think they are getting. I mean, I think they do get a lot of complaints, and they actually have the information to show. I mean, they see every contract.
2%? Is it 3%? I want to know what number of members are making these complaints. That's what.
Well,
I think.
Can't you find out?
Well, I would love for them to provide those numbers. It's not it's not public information.
I don't know.
Okay, well, here's to hoping that next week's got some better justice, right? That's going to have to do it for us. Thank you for joining me. You can tweet me at Chelsea Galicia, Yemi at
Yems on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can find me at Shaka Strong on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat.
And don't forget to like, comment, all of that sort of fun stuff, and join us next week for another episode of Justice is Served. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
From executives Keven Undergaro, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, and the entire BHL staff, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us. info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I am the official voice of Black Hollywood Live, Scipio. Instagram me at KingXOBay. Thanks for tuning in.
Hollywood redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.